Hello, and welcome to a new series where I give the women of My Hero Academia backstories because Horikoshi won't. First up, Momo. Momo is a designer baby, like Todoroki. Her mom was obsessed with the idea of being rich, so her brilliant plan was to have a baby that could create things so that it could make her counterfeit money. Her mom's quirk is to manipulate the fat in her body, and she sought out men whose quirks were to change things or to make things. She actually had 2 kids before Momo, but she put them up for adoption when their quirks manifested and she realized they wouldn't be able to do what she wanted them to. Momo has no clue they exist. Her mom has been emotionally manipulating her into making counterfeit money ever since she was a kid by only praising her when she does that or when they're spending the money. And whenever she makes something that isn't really valuable, she belittles her. That would explain why Momo's so insecure. She's only used to ever getting praised for things related to money. That would also explain why she refused to make them disguises in Camino Ward, but instead wanted to spend money on disguises. Because she knows that people like it when they get to spend her money. Her current identity is a fake. It turns out that they were actually under suspicion for using the counterfeit money, and her mom got caught. Her mom used her ability to manipulate the fat in her body to change her appearance, and they fled. Then Momo had the idea to use her quirk to make precious gems and ore, instead of using it to make counterfeit money so that it was less easily traceable, and they created new identities for themselves. That's why Momo acts so clueless about everyone making a big deal about her being rich. She doesn't want anyone to question where the money came from. Part 2 of the series where I give My Hero Academia girls backstory. Hagakure. She wasn't born invisible, and she isn't permanently invisible. She can turn her quirk off. When she was 11, she started getting really bad acne, and a lot of her classmates made fun of her for it. It turns out, whenever she gets embarrassed, her quirk activates, and so her quirk would activate every time they made fun of her. They thought that was really funny, so they started making fun of her more and more for everything about her appearance, not just her acne now. It got so bad that she would just show up to school and immediately be so embarrassed that she just turned invisible. So she decided that the next school she went to, she would just pretend that she was invisible at all times so she wouldn't have to deal with what she dealt with in middle school. Now she's struggling with the part of herself that thinks looks shouldn't matter and wants people to judge her based off of what she can do instead. The part of herself that is afraid that if she reveals how she looks, her friends will make fun of her. And the part of herself that really wants to become a super hot pro hero and make all of her middle school bullies jealous. So really quick, I just wanted to break down why I don't think there's enough female characters with backstories or enough depth to those backstories in My Hero Academia. So I made a list of all of the characters in My Hero Academia that have some semblance of backstory, and then ranked them based off of how complex those backstories are, how much sense they make, and how well they contribute to the characterization of the character. I'm only taking the main manga and anime into account. The top tier is characters with the most complex backstories that contribute to their characterization throughout the show and get development because of them. Then there's characters that got complex backstories and got a whole arc of development because of them. Then there's the characters with good complex backstories, but it doesn't contribute a whole lot throughout the manga. Then there's the characters with complex backstories that make sense for them, but it only really held any weight in one episode or 1 or 2 chapters. Then there's the characters with backstories that make sense or explain something about them, but the only reason they even got a backstory was because of somebody else's backstory. Then there's Uraraka, who got a backstory that makes sense for her, but it was very brief and doesn't contribute much to her characterization. Then there's characters that got a mention of a backstory, but it makes sense for them and contributes to their character. Ragdoll is a special mention because even though she didn't get a backstory, she did get a complete and satisfying character arc, even though it was pretty brief. Then there's characters who get details about their backstory dropped here and there, but it doesn't feel like it's completely done yet. Characters with one blink and you'll miss it bit of backstory that doesn't contribute much to them. We know 1 or 2 details about his life, so I'm gonna count it. These characters appeared in other people's flashbacks, but we didn't learn much. And finally, characters that got 1 backstory detail. The point is that even when I try to stretch the definition of backstory as much as I can to fit women in there, there's still 3 times as many men with backstories as there are women. Plus, there's only 3 girls in total with complex backstories, and they're all side characters. I'm not saying that I don't like the show or the manga, I'm just saying that it has flaws, and it's important to recognize those flaws, especially when they're kind of sexist. Welcome to part 3 of giving My Hero Academia women backstories, Froppy. Froppy has a backstory already, but it's only in the bonus content of the manga, and it doesn't actually contribute to her character at all, so I'm going to be telling you what it is, and then telling you how it could be used to contribute to her character in the main story. Her canon backstory is that she has 2 younger siblings that she basically had to raise on her own because her parents travel for work a lot. Now here's how I would apply that. When moving into the dorms, Froppy has a conversation with Deku about how worried she is to leave her siblings behind. A couple months after moving in, Deku catches a little kid he doesn't recognize running around the dorms. He catches the kid, and it turns out it's Tsuyu's little sister. Froppy's parents didn't have enough time to get a babysitter before going on a work trip, so she snuck her siblings into the dorms. Everyone in 1A ends up finding out, and they're all fawning over these little kids. And Denki turns to Asui and he's like, "You'd make a great mom one day." Then she reveals that she doesn't see herself ever becoming a mom because she knows how much work it is and she wants to focus on becoming a hero instead. Giving the My Hero Academia girls' backstories, Part 4, Mina. Mina's mom is a therapist and her dad is a professor of psychology, so they're very big on open communication, but they view it kind of clinically, which Mina finds stuffy. So she makes an effort to do open communication her own way, a more personal way where she makes an effort to get to know everyone that she meets. Her dad's kind of a nervous person, so he made her sit through a bunch of different lectures on how to deal with potentially bad social situations, but she never really pays full attention to them. Even just from half listening, though, she has a lot of perspective on communication and conflict resolution. She's able to use what she half remembers and a mixture of her own bubbly personality and methods to make this work for her. She applies that knowledge in situations like Kiroshima's flashback, where she was able to get a bully and the bullyee to get along. When she becomes a pro hero, she gets really popular in certain circles for always working to help people that turn to villainy due to unfortunate circumstances or out of need. Unfortunately, though, because she's so kind all the time and because she never really had to work to establish boundaries with her parents, she doesn't really know how to push to establish her boundaries, and sometimes people try to take advantage of her kindness. Giving the My Hero Academia girls' backstories, Part 5, Uraraka. Her canon backstory, which I've pinned in the comments if you need a refresher, is short and never really applied to her character very much in canon. So here's how I'd fix that. Uraraka chose to become a hero in particular out of all the different money-making professions so that she could help her parents with construction work under the guise of training. Every Sunday she goes to construction sites and helps her parents lift heavy objects with her quirk in order to save them time and money on expensive machinery. She's had to skip out on a few class hangouts because of this. When it's announced that dormitories will be built for UA, she immediately plugs her parents' construction company for the job and gets them hired. Aizawa comes on campus one day while it's being built and he sees Uraraka lifting something heavy with her quirk and they make eye contact and she's just like, "It's quirk practice." Her parents' construction company gets a lot of free advertisement during this process since it's a highly publicized project, and so things start to look up for them financially. At the start of the show, she's thinner with gaunt cheeks, but as the story progresses and her parents get better off financially and she starts to train more, she gains more fat in her face and she starts to get more muscular. Eventually, her family gets to a place where they're pretty well off financially, and she starts to realize that the excuse of doing hero work for money is now just an excuse, and she's doing it because she legitimately enjoys the profession. Giving My Hero Academia girls' backstory, Part 6, Jiro. Jiro has a little bit of a canon backstory, which I pinned in the comments if you need a refresher, but it could use a little more depth, so here's how I'd fix that. She likes all kind of music, but her favorite kind, and the kind that she would want to create if she became a musician, is more on the experimental side and less polished. It's not exactly mainstream music, and her parents are in the more mainstream side of the industry, so all of their connections would basically be useless to her if she wanted to go into music. So she knows it would have been hard to make a living off of her passion. She's also a little bit ashamed of that decision because her parents are always telling her to follow her passions without fear, and she feels like that was a cowardly decision. She's insecure and a little standoffish because her parents don't really understand her favorite kinds of music, and neither do her peers. She's gotten made fun of it before. Not like hardcore, but they have teased her for it, and it's her favorite thing, so it feels bad to be teased about it. The concert still opened the gateway for her to stop thinking about music and hero work as two completely separate things, but she's still afraid to share the stuff she's really passionate about. Then she gets a support item that allows her to amplify her voice through her speakers instead of her heartbeat, and Present Mike takes her on as a student. Eventually, she learns that Present Mike also likes all kind of music, even the stuff that she's into, and he's able to encourage her to incorporate the kind of stuff that she likes into her fighting style. So there's a scene with her and Present Mike taking down a villain, and Present Mike is just like, "Yeah!" And she's just like, "Ooh!" Her friends at UA are just confused but supportive, like, "That was a great takedown!" But she's just happy because not only did she get to combine the two things she loved, but she was finally able to work up the courage to share the thing that she's actually really passionate about. Giving My Hero Academia girls' backstories, Part 7, Nejire. So Nejire's main attributes in canon are just that she's pretty and bubbly and perceived as ditzy, and the thing that men typically have towards pretty, bubbly, ditzy women is the audacity. So Nejire has been dealing with unwanted advances from creepy men for a very long time now. She was an early bloomer, and in middle school one of her teachers started making inappropriate comments toward her that made her very uncomfortable. He didn't stop when she told her to, so she went to another teacher to report it, and the teacher did not take her seriously at all. We also know that Nejire can be really focused and competent when the need arises, though. So she started looking into codes of conduct for her middle school and the laws that they had to abide by, and she used that information to gather evidence on her teacher's behavior and get him fired and the teacher that wouldn't help her also in trouble. That incident is part of what inspired her to become a hero, because she wants to be a person in a position of power that people can rely on when they need help, like that teacher wasn't for her. And when she starts interacting with Class 1A more and Mineta decides to try her, well, she knows exactly what to do to make sure that she can give him a black eye and he can get a month's worth of detention and mandatory sensitivity training. And she shows up to Class 1A after to tell the girls that they deserve to get an education without having to worry about his behavior and how to report it if he ever does anything like that to them. Giving My Hero Academia Girls Backstories Part 8. Miruko, the bunny hero. Playing into the bunny trope, she was born into a huge family with a lot of siblings. Unfortunately, because of this, she wasn't given a lot of attention as a child, and sometimes people would even forget to feed her or pick her up from school. So she ended up learning how to be really self-sufficient. She was kind of middle of the pack though, so as soon as she started learning how to take care of herself, she was asked to babysit both her little siblings and her nieces and nephews. She was the kind of caretaker that was just completely over it, but the kids loved her anyways because she would unintentionally delight them. She'd just be holding a toddler upside down by the foot like, surely if I mess up badly enough, I'll get out of babysitting duty. And then the kid would just start giggling and suddenly it's a game now. Now, she kind of still holds a grudge against her parents for making her grow up so fast and take care of all their children. So she doesn't really interact with most of her family very much. Because she had to learn to take care of herself, she views herself as very strong and independent and believes everybody else should be that way too. Which explains the one fact we know about her, which is that she's a lone wolf. She denies it with everything she has, but she has a bit of a secret soft side. She checks in on her younger siblings and nieces and nephews every now and again to make sure they're okay, and they all have her phone number and know that they can use it if they ever really need help. Because despite her belief that everybody should be independent, there's a part of her that knows that she would have given anything to have someone like that in her life when she was a kid. Giving the My Hero Academia Women Backstories Part 9, Mount Lady. Mount Lady was raised in a family of heroes, like Ida was. She has one older sister, and they both decided that they wanted to become heroes when they were kids. There was a bit of sibling rivalry going on, trying to get their parents' attention and trying to prove that each was better than the other. And Mount Lady started to catch up to her sister as she got older. Pretty soon after that, her sister got into high school on the hero track, and Mount Lady was determined not to lose any of the ground she had gained, so she trained on her own while in middle school. She didn't notice at first because she was so busy training and because they weren't going to the same school anymore, but once her sister got into high school, she started losing motivation to become a hero pretty quickly. By the time Mount Lady got into high school on the hero track, her sister had already decided to quit training to be a hero. Without her sister to compete with, Mount Lady just started competing against the world. She decided she wanted to be the #1 hero, and she's absolutely ruthless in the pursuit of that. Hence the attention hogging and taking credit for wins. Eventually, she's able to have a conversation with her sister about why she decided to quit training to become a hero. And her sister told her that it was because even just from her first year of high school, she'd noticed the dad, their horses, and some of the police officers to create homunculi to protect himself. Eventually, the villain was captured, but her dad died caught in the crossfire. Pony saw the whole thing. Pony's been dealing with PTSD ever since seeing that, and one of her biggest triggers is horses. She couldn't really help out around the ranch very much anymore because of that. Instead, she started to watch a lot of hero anime in her free time, learning Japanese and fantasizing about being a hero who saved her dad. One day, she saw an ad for a foreign exchange program to Japan and jokingly brought it up with her mom. But her mom took her seriously. She told her that with her dad's life insurance money, she could afford to send her to Japan. And that while she can't become a hero to go back in time to save her dad, she could become a hero to save other people's dads. And that her father would have wanted her to do something that made her happy instead of moping around surrounded by things that just remind her of his death. Giving My Hero Academia Women Backstories Part 11, Miss Joke. Public knowledge dictates that her quirk is to make people laugh, but the truth is, it's more complex than that. Her quirk is to project and amplify emotion. So anything she is feeling, she can make the people around her feel it 10 times worse. When she was a kid, she did not have very good control of her quirk, especially when she was feeling negative emotion. So she was a bit of a social outcast because of that. Because every time she felt something bad, the people around her would feel it 10 times worse. By the time she entered middle school, she was experiencing depression from the isolation, which just made things worse. She ended up in a class with a class clown. They were the kind of person that could make anyone laugh, but she just couldn't see the reason to laugh anymore. So they made it their personal mission to make her in particular laugh. One day they succeeded, and she was so surprised that she lost control of her quirk and sent the entire room into chaos laughing. At which point the class clown was like, you're my friend now. Eventually, they suggested that she try to find the humor everywhere in life so that when she used her quirk, it would be to make people laugh instead of cry. Things started looking up for her. She started getting happier. But she also noticed that making people laugh could actually be pretty debilitating. Her friend joked that she could become a hero and use that as her takedown, and she was like, yeah, actually, I could. And thus, a hero was born. She's dating the class clown now, but that's not public information because they're a civilian and she doesn't want them to get hurt. When she met Aizawa for the first time, she told her partners the details of like what he's like and what his quirk is, and they started cracking up. They were like, it would be so funny if you two were the one dating. Imagine you're waiting at the altar, just grinning, laughing, so happy. The people around you are feeling happy because of your quirk, and then Aizawa comes down the aisle just stone-faced. She thought that was the funniest thing on earth, and that's why she jokingly hits on Aizawa every time she sees him. Giving the My Hero Girls backstories part 12, Mei Hatsume. She's never really been good at relating to her peers, so she started reading a lot and watching a lot of TV. There wasn't much else for her to do. But one day on her birthday, someone decided to gift her one of those science kits for kids, and she became obsessed. She really loved the idea of figuring out how things were made, so she started reading a lot of books about it and watching a lot of shows about it and asking for more science kits. But pretty soon she got bored with all the kids stuff because it was very basic and confining. So eventually she started taking things apart and rebuilding them. Things like the toaster. Sometimes she would put things back together and instead of working, they would explode. At first her parents just tried hiding stuff like appliances and screwdrivers, but she would always find it. So eventually they just started giving her things that were already broken to take apart and put back together. One day when she was around 12, she and her parents went on a walk in a town over, and they walked past that beach that Midoriya cleaned up as a part of his training. Her parents had seen it plenty of times before, and she had too, but this time the context was different. She looked out into a sea of junk and saw opportunity. Her parents, who at this point just wanted to be able to use their toaster without worrying about it also being a flamethrower, were like, go for it, just please. And so Hatsume started regularly visiting that beach. Then suddenly someone started cleaning the beach, and somehow she was never there to catch the culprit. So she didn't figure out who was poaching her baby material until she was in UA. When she finds out what Midoriya has done, there's a very scary toaster in his future.